The sunny spring day in Redwood Gardens did not portend any trouble. This suburb had always been considered an oasis of tranquility and carefree living, a place where children could freely play on the well-kept lawns, and parents could fearlessly let them walk to school alone. Huge houses with white fences, manicured gardens, and friendly neighbors created an illusion of absolute safety. That's why no one paid much attention to 13-year-old Emily, who decided to take a walk to the local park that day. She was walking along the familiar path, enjoying the warm breeze and the scent of blooming cherry trees. The girl could not know that she had been watched for a long time. She could not feel the predatory gaze that followed her every step from the dark window of one of those perfect houses. This is where the most terrifying truth lies. Monsters do not hide under the bed or in dark alleys. They live among us, wear suits, smile at neighbors, and wait for the right moment. And today, one of them decided it was time to hunt. April Millsap was born on January 2nd, 2000. Until the summer of 2014, she lived with her family in Armada, a small town located in the state of Michigan, USA. April was a friendly and charming 14-year-old girl. She was in high school, in the upper grades. April had no siblings. When April was 6, her parents divorced. Her father entered into a relationship with another man named David. April and her stepfather quickly got along and maintained a warm relationship. April was very cheerful and had a wonderful sense of humor, which constantly delighted her family. Her positive outlook on life allowed her to surround herself with many friends who only rallied around April. She was a creative person, loved to draw, led an active lifestyle, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Despite her young age, she seemed older than her years. At 14, April had already become quite independent and walked her dog alone. She loved spending time with friends, but was also close to her family. April had a boyfriend named Austin, who was a year older. They went to school together and met there. At the time of the described events, they had been dating for about a year. In 2014, the population of Armada was about 1,700 people. The place turned out to be safe, ideal for a family to live and raise children. Everyone knew each other well, literally by face. However, as life experience shows, such circumstances make places like this very attractive to criminals. Here they strike rarely, but it causes real panic. July 24th, 2014. Summer vacation was in full swing. On this day, April was not going to go anywhere or gather noisy companies. Instead, she slept until noon and then spent the whole day at the computer, communicating with friends and playing games. Around 6 p.m., April decided to go for a walk with her dog named Penny. She often took her pet with her, including with friends and her boyfriend Austin. The same thing happened this time. April chose one of the usual walking routes that she took quite often, just to get some fresh air. Usually, such walks lasted no more than an hour. April did not take the animal with her for a long time. Her mother was waiting for her at home calmly. However, even after an hour and a half had passed, April still did not appear. Jennifer tried to call her daughter and sent several text messages. But instead of answering the call, it redirected her to voicemail, and the messages remained unread. The woman began to worry and called her daughter's boyfriend Austin, hoping they were together. When the young man mentioned that he had not seen his girlfriend all day and had only communicated with her on the internet, Jennifer started to really panic. She continued to call April's school friends, but no one knew where she might be. Less than half an hour had passed. There was a knock at the door. Jennifer hoped it was her daughter returning from the walk and opened it with relief. But in reality, Austin was standing on the doorstep with his friend. According to him, they both came to make sure April was okay. But he also could not find April. The guy looked alarmed and showed Jennifer the message he received from April at 6:28. In fact, it was about 40 minutes after she left the house to walk the dog. Despite the fact that Austin had previously claimed that he had not received any messages from his girlfriend, he now slightly changed his version. The guy said that either he didn't notice it right away, or he was out of the network coverage area before that. But as soon as he managed to get in touch, he received the message with a long delay. According to him, it had a very alarming content. A short phrase, "Someone tried to kidnap me." Therefore, he became worried and went to look for her. Jennifer took these words seriously and immediately called her husband David at work. He panicked and rushed home to search for April together with Austin, his friend, and his wife. They all knew the routes April used to take well. They split up to cover more territory and several trails April could have taken at once. Jennifer called the police, and they also joined the search for the missing traveler. Soon the missing person was found. According to a man and woman who were jogging on one of the trails, around 8:20 p.m., they came across a dog. The animal had a leash, but no one was following it. The woman tried to take the dog by the leash, but it behaved very excitedly. The dog began to run away from them, stopping as if it wanted to show something. The couple followed the animal. The dog dived into a thick bush, and behind it appeared the body of a girl. It was an area densely overgrown with vegetation in a bloody ravine. Later, the girl was identified as 14-year-old April Millsap. However, it was not easy to do this. By the time her loved ones reached this place, law enforcement officers were already working there. Employees of law enforcement agencies from other regions, who clearly had greater capabilities, were immediately involved in the investigation. The fact is that there were only 2 police officers in Armada who were not prepared for such work and had no relevant experience. Crimes occurred extremely rarely here, so a couple of employees were quite enough to counter local thieves. But not this time. None of the police officers had ever dealt with violent murders. Given the virtually non-existent resources for the investigation, the sheriff immediately turned to more competent authorities working in the county. April was found at the bottom of the ravine, lying on her back. Her shoes were removed and thrown a few meters from the body. Clothes and underwear were pulled down, which clearly indicated a sexual motive for the crime. However, further analysis showed that April was never raped. Detectives suggested that such an attempt took place, but April apparently desperately resisted and ruined the attacker's plans. Or someone scared him off, perhaps the dog or a passerby. One way or another, the girl was brutally beaten. She had bruises all over her body, from defensive wounds to her face. It was so disfigured, actually crushed. The coroner was able to identify at least 48 separate injuries, a significant portion of which were concentrated in the face and neck area. The victim was covered in clotted blood. The coroner found traces of neck compression. However, they were not characteristic of the classic method of strangulation with bare hands or foreign objects. Her face and neck had strange prints. During the analysis, it was possible to understand that all these were shoe tread marks. So the criminal was trampling and walking on her. The forensic expert noted in his conclusion that April was actually trampled to death. Marks remained on the head and neck that resembled the shape of the sole of a large sneaker. Given the nature of the wounds, we were clearly talking about a tall man. In addition, the coroner found that the execution lasted more than 10 minutes, and April died in terrible agony. At this stage, it was difficult to identify the victim. It was precisely because of the nature of the injuries that the face became unrecognizable. Only relatives who were looking for the traveler at the time, when law enforcement officers were already working there, were able to recognize her by her clothes and jewelry. It was impossible to tell who was lying in front of them by the face. This shocked her loved ones, especially her mother. From the very beginning, the parents, stepfather, boyfriend, and his friend were taken to the police station for questioning. They had to talk with them in order to form a circle of probable suspects to clarify the latest events in the victim's life. The father and stepfather were excluded from this list rather quickly, after which the police became interested in the murdered girl's boyfriend, Austin. The officers immediately had suspicions when the young man began to say that the relationship with his beloved had recently been difficult. They often quarreled, and the couple was actually on the verge of breaking up. Shortly before the murder, they quarreled again. Austin's second suspicious discovery was the message April sent shortly before the massacre. She wrote to her boyfriend that someone tried to kidnap her, but he simply ignored such a frightening message from April. However, Austin himself insisted that he could not do this, since the message arrived with a delay, and he did not see it. Apparently, some kind of failure occurred. It was delivered with a long delay. In the detective's opinion, the guy reacted very sluggishly after receiving the message. He did not report this to the police, but simply went to look for her. According to Austin, he was still offended by his girlfriend, and he considered this message an attempt to manipulate. The young man thought that she was trying to provoke his interest and concern so that he would be the first to go for reconciliation. He did not realize that everything was so serious. As for the quarrel, Austin insisted that April's behavior was incomprehensible. The last conflict arose out of the blue. He still could not say exactly what caused the differences between them and blamed April for it. All this only reinforced the suspicions of the detectives, because the guy could have a motive for the attack. In most cases, violence is committed by partners. The officers decided to detain him longer and asked him to tell how the schoolboy's day went, in all details, in order to analyze his movements, as well as a possible alibi. Austin said that around 4 p.m., he met with his friend to help bring a TV into the house. After that, they went to the nearest McDonald's to have a snack. In the end, the young man's words were verified because he really appeared on the cafe's CCTV cameras at the specified time. This happened around 6:30. Just a few minutes after the alarming message about the kidnapping attempt was sent, it became obvious that the young man could not have participated in the murder in any way. He could not be the killer, so it was decided to take the victim's mobile phone for analysis, hoping that it would provide more information. It was hoped that April could have received a message from the stalker who was hunting her. But the victim's mobile phone could not be found at the murder scene. Detectives speculated that the killer had taken it with him, turned it off so it couldn't be tracked, and dumped it elsewhere. In search of the phone and other evidence, forensic experts began to thoroughly examine the entire trail that April was supposed to have taken, but to no avail. Law enforcement officers with specially trained dogs, and even the FBI were involved in this. After almost a day of searching, it seemed all in vain, but the efforts paid off. The very next day, about a kilometer from the scene of the massacre, they found the girl's mobile phone, which was immediately sent for examination to the forensic laboratory. The victim's mobile phone provided interesting information. In particular, it was found out that she actively communicated at school with a young man named Roger. He was known for his unpleasant character and often got into trouble. But during the check, the guy was also excluded from the list of suspects. He had a confirmed alibi. On the same day, several people came to the department who pointed to a suspicious motorcycle and its driver. These people saw April when the schoolgirl was walking the dog on the trail around 6:30. According to them, she was not alone. At that time, she was walking with an adult man, much older, who was pushing his motorcycle with his hands. They were strolling and, it seems, just talking. Then people thought it was April's father. He did not arouse any suspicion and behaved calmly. April also did not seem frightened. But now, rethinking the situation, doubts arose about this man. None of the victim's relatives and acquaintances could recognize him by description. He was clearly unfamiliar to April until that moment. Judging by the description of the witnesses, the meeting took place approximately at the time when April wrote to her boyfriend about the probable kidnapping attempt. Therefore, suspicions about this man were growing. There were few motorcyclists in this city, so he immediately attracted the attention of local residents. Moreover, the motorcycle itself was very unusual, a rare blue and white color. The orientation turned out to be accurate. This made it possible Just 3 days after the murder of the girl, on April 27, 2014, to find a motorcycle that exactly matched the description. It was parked in the driveway of one of the local houses. When the police arrived there, the vehicle was still near the house. They approached the man who was working in the garden, and he recalled that it was not his motorcycle. The bike actually belonged to his 32-year-old friend named James VanCallis. He lived in the neighboring town of Goodell's, located about 30 kilometers from Armada. This information was confirmed. On November 28th, officers met with the motorcycle owner. They decided to talk to him and clarify how he spent the day when April was killed. From the very beginning, James willingly cooperated with the police. James was ready to answer any questions. He recalled that during this period he was at the house of his friend in Armada, and he confirmed his words. But this alibi seemed unreliable to the authorities, because the witness who confirmed the words was a friend, quite capable of covering up the criminal. In addition, there were minor discrepancies regarding the time. The man was asked for the shoes in which he walked that day. He provided a pair of white sneakers, but the tread did not match the marks left on the victim's body. There were no blood stains on these sneakers. Suspicions arose that these were not the right shoes. After that, the detectives decided to learn more about James in order to exclude him from the list of possible murderers. He had a series of convictions, but not for violent crimes. He had charges of breaking and entering a house, as well as for non-payment of alimony. The robberies occurred in 2005 and 2006. But when considering this man's criminal past, the police found something much more terrifying. His father, named James VanCallis Sr., was a registered offender prone to sexual assaults. During this period, both men lived in the same family house. As it turned out, the elder was accused of sexual harassment of a minor child who had barely turned 13 at the time of the harassment. It was assumed that both men could be involved in criminal episodes. However, the focus was on the son, since witnesses saw a middle-aged man. He was the one recognized by eyewitnesses. Searches were conducted in their house. It turned out that both were growing forbidden plants on their property. The quantity was so large that they were arrested and charged with drug distribution. This made it possible to protect the public from potential killers and continue the investigation without the risk of them fleeing the state. The police checked absolutely all the shoes found in the men's house, but none of the treads matched the marks on the dead girl's body. Numerous DNA analyses were also carried out on clothing, but no matches with April's traces could be found either. Nevertheless, the forensic experts who examined the motorcycle were sure that shortly before the police took it for analysis, it had been thoroughly washed. Moreover, with the use of strong cleaning agents, it was believed that this could be an attempt to wash away evidence, and quite successful at that, since no traces remained. The detective's theory was quickly confirmed when James's girlfriend, named Crystal, contacted the department. She recalled that on the day of April's murder, she returned home and found James cleaning his shoes, motorcycle, and helmet. He did it so thoroughly and used such strong disinfectants that she suspected something was wrong. The marks on April's head resembled helmet marks. Apparently, James used it during the murder. The woman also reported that in the afternoon he drove to the neighboring city, where the victim of the massacre lived, to his brother. She described the pair of sneakers he was wearing. They were his favorite black and white Air Jordan sneakers. They did not match the ones he handed over to the detectives when he first met with them. Crystal also said that after that night, she never saw that pair of shoes again. Probably, the killer got rid of his favorite shoes, realizing that he would not be able to wash off all the traces. The woman described her relationship with James in detail to the police. According to her, he was very cruel and prone to violence. She recently felt like a hostage and the property of a man. James controlled absolutely all aspects of her life. He even forbade her to leave the house when he could not accompany her. From the very beginning, she did not trust him, but was afraid that he would kill her if she went to the police. Now that the criminal's family had been detained, she was able to speak without restrictions. According to his own confession, which he made to his beloved, James was cleaning his things because he got them dirty with engine oil while repairing his bike. But she did not believe him. The police needed to prove that the criminal was wearing the shoes Crystal was talking about at all. They managed to find photos on the man's social network page where he was wearing sneakers identical to the description. Of course, James got rid of the pair he was wearing on the day of the murder. But this did not prevent the police from finding and purchasing exactly the same ones and comparing the tread pattern with the marks on the victim's body. Forensic experts immediately found a clear match. April Millsap was trampled to death in exactly the same sneakers that James had purchased about a year before the attack. During a check of the criminal's computer, it was possible to find confirmation of suspicions. He was clearly interested in girls much younger than him. Even more valuable information was provided by April's mobile phone after analysis in the FBI laboratory. As it turned out, she had a fitness app installed that tracked speed of movement, steps, heart rate, and other parameters. Shortly after sending the alarming message to her boyfriend Austin, she sped up significantly, as if trying to escape from someone. Apparently, James VanCallis drove up to her on his motorcycle and offered something, after which April sent a message to her boyfriend about an attempted kidnapping. At the same moment, she accelerated to get away from the pursuer. Just a few minutes after that, the fitness app recorded a multiple increase in activity. The movements of the phone were chaotic and excessively fast. This lasted for 10 to 15 minutes. Obviously, this is how the moment of the schoolgirl's struggle for her life was recorded, which, unfortunately, she lost. A few minutes after that, the criminal reached his vehicle with the stolen phone. Now the app showed a speed of about 20 kilometers per hour. It was maintained until the very moment when the phone was thrown a kilometer from the scene of the attack on April. There were several surveillance cameras on the biker's route, and the police managed to record him. It was the same motorcycle, and 32-year-old James VanCallis Jr. The geolocation of his mobile phone confirmed that at the time of the attack, he was not at his friend's house, but near the crime scene. Now no one had any doubts about his involvement in the murder. At this stage, the prosecutor's office had sufficient grounds to bring charges of April's murder and start a court battle. However, there was a problem, since no direct evidence could be found. The police did not have DNA that would link the criminal and the victim. Of course, against this background, the lawyers could effectively refer to the indirectness of the evidence provided. No matter how hard the forensic experts tried, they could not find the victim's blood on the criminal's belongings, equipment, and helmet. He thoroughly cleaned everything and got rid of all things. Obviously, the man was very experienced in these matters. In the end, the prosecutor's office decided to go all in. Despite the indirectness of the evidence provided, there was too much of it. It was believed that this would be enough to convince the jury of James's guilt. In October 2014, 3 months after the crime was completed, the man was charged. The trial was scheduled for early 2016. The prosecution believed that he attacked the passerby because of a refusal of intimacy. For a long time, he had been searching the internet for various methods of seduction, trying to find out how to interest a much younger girl, especially a minor. But obviously, all these tips did not work. Unfortunately for the victim, the man could not accept the refusal, so he attacked April. The defense, as expected, tried to convince the jury that the prosecution had no irrefutable evidence of James's guilt, and the entire tactic of the prosecutor's office was built only on indirect evidence. The criminal insisted on his innocence, but all this looked unconvincing. The lawyer's last attempt was to note that the defendant had not previously been involved in any serious crime. Fortunately, this was not enough to acquit James. After deliberating for several hours, the jury unanimously found him guilty of attempted kidnapping, rape, and premeditated murder. As a result, James VanCallis Jr. was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. April Millsap's mother spoke at length during the sentencing. The woman was satisfied with the court's decision and the fact that the criminal would never be released. She was shocked that a child could die at the hands of an adult man just because he was refused. His actions and intentions were criminal in nature from the very beginning, but the cruelty was incomparable. Despite this, James did not admit his guilt and did not repent of anything. He continued to insist that he did not commit this crime. Immediately after the trial, he tried to appeal the court's decision. He filed an appeal through a lawyer, but to no avail. He is still behind bars. After the brutal massacre of an innocent girl, a memorial garden was built in April's honor, located not far from the very place where her life was literally trampled. There is also a small statue in the form of a dog named Penny, which led strangers to the place where her owner was brutally killed. Unfortunately, the pet was not able to find help quickly enough to save her life. The tragic story of April Millsap is a terrible reminder of how dangerous the world can be even in seemingly the safest places. This chilling tale is about the shattered life of a young girl, full of dreams and hopes, which was cut short by the cruelty and perverse desires of an adult man. April became a victim not only of James VanCallis, but also of society's indifference to violence against women and children. This case showed how important it is to pay attention to alarming signals, respond to threats in a timely manner, and do everything possible to protect our children from potential predators. Although justice prevailed in this case, and the killer received the deserved punishment, nothing will bring April back to life or heal the wounds of her loved ones. This story will forever remain a painful memory for her family, friends, and the entire Armada community. But at the same time, this tragedy demonstrated the strength of the human spirit and compassion. People rallied to support April's family, help the investigation, and honor the girl's memory. The memorial garden and the statue of the dog, Penny, became symbols of resilience in the face of evil and hope for a better future. April Millsap's story is not just another episode of the Criminal Chronicle. It is a call to each of us to be vigilant, caring, and humane, because only then can we build a society in which our children will be safe and criminals will not be able to escape punishment. If this story touched you, subscribe to the YouTube channel Detective Brooks. There you will find many other fascinating stories about real crimes, professional analysis of events, and exclusive details of investigations. Join the community of caring people and help spread important information that can save someone's life. Remember, evil is afraid of light, and as long as we are united, we are invincible.